Hello everyone, this is Fazana from Fazana's Law, and in today's video I'll be sharing with you all how to pass the Wills and Administration and Interview and Advising module in the Legal Practice course. So if you're interested to find out the tips, then please keep watching this video till the end. Before I begin this video, I want to tell you how I will be structuring this video. So first of all, I'll be starting off with the definition of the Wills and Administration and what the module actually means. Second of all, I'll be sharing with you tips in terms of the knowledge-based part of the assessment, which is the Wills and Administration, and then I'll be talking about some of the tips based on interview and advising and how to really ace that part of the assessment. So what I'm starting off now is all about the definition of the Wills and Administration and the module itself and what it means. So this module is basically kind of like an interview style type of an assessment where you will be giving a scenario on the spot in the exam on the assessment day, and then you will have to advise the client in front of you, who is usually going to be an actor, and advise them based on whether you have a will, whether they have a will in hand or they don't, and then you would have to advise them according to all the problems and different kinds of things that they have and they don't have, and what are the issues going on in their life and so on. So it's a very on the spot type of an assessment. You can't really do a lot of prep on it, but you can, and this is where all the tips I will be sharing with you all will be coming in handy in this video, hopefully. So now that I've covered the definition part of the Wills and Administration and Interview and Advising module, now I'm going to be moving on to all the tips related to Wills and Administration part of the assessment. So the first tip that I can give you in terms of the Wills and Administration part of the assessment is making sure that you're learning the topics as well as you can and trying to understand them, because if you don't understand the topics, then you'll not be able to advise their clients in a really good manner that they will be able to understand, because sometimes the clients might also have questions, for example, for the basic definitions, but if you don't even know the definitions answers yourselves, you'll never be able to really try to make them understand what the topic is about and what they're doing and so on, what's the best thing to do. So I highly recommend for you to really make sure that you are listening to the large groups as much as you can and trying to understand the basics. For example, what makes a valid will, what makes a will not valid, or what makes it fall out of the estate, what is within the estate, what are the assets that are included in a particular will, and how can it be distributed between different family members, and so on. So it's very, very important that you understand the basics and trying to really understand and make a really good notes on that, so that when the advice comes into play or when you're going to be actually doing the assessment, you know exactly what the client, and you're very confident about it as well. The second tip is a follow-up to the first tip that I had already given you already, which is all about making sure that you're creating a mind map or a review dump or a brain dump or a cheat sheet, whatever you call it, of all the topics that you have learned in the Wills and Administration module, and try to basically review at least 2 weeks before the real exam. But I highly encourage for you to follow these tips, especially before the mock, because in that way you will have an idea of how to prepare for it, how to really have the mindset for it, and so on. So it's very important that you're reviewing the topics as well as you can and try to understand, as I mentioned before, because in that way you will be also to remember some of the basic definitions in a very good manner, and making sure that you're not looking as though you're not confident in the assessment, because that's a really important point, which is not to feel like not to show that you're very nervous or you don't know what you're doing or you look very lost or confused when the client actually asks you something, and also because there's going to be another teacher involved there as well. So you want to make sure that you're looking as confident as possible, and that will come with practice of understanding the knowledge of the topics and the basic definitions in the Wills and Administration module. So that will be my second tip. The third tip best that I can give you when it comes to understanding Wills and Administration is making sure that you are gathering all the different kinds of scenarios that you can be possibly given in the module, and try to write a written answer or a written advice to those questions and then send them off to your module leader. This is probably the best way of actually learning the topic, because you're going to be advising the client, and if you can do that orally as well as you're advising and as you're writing it down as well, the answer, that's also a really good way for you to practice for the real thing. And at the same time, gathering all the scenarios gives you and allows you to be familiar with all kinds of scenarios and all the possible scenarios that could be given in the exam, because let's be honest, the teachers are not as creative as creating new different kinds of scenarios all the time, so they will always pick out the ones that are happening in the past, or they have already used it in a workshop maybe or a tutorial and so on. So it's very important that you're very smart at gathering all the different kinds of scenarios together, try to understand it, write a written answer or a written advice to those, and then send it off to your module leader or a teacher that might be able to see it in the free time. And also, if you can book any kind of office hours meetings, that's also a really good way for you to really make sure that you are understanding the topic very well and also giving the right advice. The fourth tip that I can give you in terms of learning and understanding wills and administration is making sure that you're paying attention to the questions or the possible questions that the client might ask. For example, what are the solicitor's fees? What are the costs for this? How do you calculate tax? How do you calculate the funeral costs? What will be this and that? So these are the possible kind of questions that any kind of ordinary client can actually have, and try to prepare a pre-written answer to that, so that you can actually not feel really confused as to when you're going to be answering the question. You're not going to be confused and looking for notes and stuff, because I promise to you, in the assessment you will not have time to look at the notes and trying to look at what could be the answer for this or what is this. And so try to be pre-prepared as much as you can, which is why I'm telling you to use your mock as a really good way for you to really practice for the real one. Because even if you fail the mock, it doesn't really matter, because at least you're getting practice, and that's the whole point of this, is to get practice with the mock. And I cannot stress enough how important the mock for the wills and administration and interview and advising module is in the legal practice course, because it is either fail or a pass, and it's probably one of the hard ones as well, but you can do it. So the last point, or the last tip that I would highly recommend for you to really remember, is making sure that you understand how to calculate inheritance tax. This is probably the only calculation bit you will have to do in wills and administration, but it is one of the most important ones. And at the end of the day, it's just 1 mark, so it doesn't really matter. But if you can impressively do it, it's a really good way for you to show how confident you are in your subject matter to the teacher as well, who will be marking your work. So inheritance tax, definitely the best way to do it is by practicing multiple times and as many times as you can. But at the end of the day, remember, it is just 1 mark, so it doesn't really are the end of it or a life and death situation if you don't know how to do it. But it just shows how confident you are in a way when you're actually in the assessment and doing that calculation in front of the client and in front of the supervisor as well. So I highly recommend for you to really practice in terms of inheritance tax. And obviously, if you don't know how to calculate it, or you don't know how to answer a question when it comes to this, then please do ask the teachers as much as you can before the exam happens, so that you have room for improvement and you can do the best you can. So that's the whole point, to do your best you can in the exam. And if there are room for improvements, of course you should go for it and try to tell your teacher. But when it comes to inheritance tax, as I mentioned before, is to practice is the best way to do it. But just remember that it's just 1 mark for the assessment. Those will be all the tips in terms of the wills and administration part of the assessment, but now I'll be moving on to the interviewing and advising. So when it comes to the first tip for the interviewing and advising element of the assessment, I highly recommend for all of you to watch all the interviews that are uploaded on Moodle or any other website or a system that is actually provided by your university. This is a really good way for you to really practice for the interview, because you're actually seeing how the student is acting and how the student is answering the questions with confidence, and also how are they trying to manage all the time within that time limit of 25 minutes. So make sure that you are looking at other people doing the interview as well. If that could be also the case in your university, there could be other classmates of yours that are also doing practice interviews, and they're very comfortable for you to share their videos of them practicing as well. That's also a really good way for you to practice. But the most important way is, of course, practicing yourself, and watching it just gives you that confidence that you can also do it as well. So this is why I highly recommend for you to watch any kind of videos or interviews uploaded by your module leaders on Moodle or any other website for that matter, so Blackboard, and try to watch it and try to carefully make notes. How are they acting? How are they behaving? How are they answering the questions of the clients? How are they doing the inheritance tax, for example? And what are they including, what not including when they're doing that calculation, and so on. So it's a very good way for you to practice and give you that boost of confidence. The second tip to make sure that you're acing that interviewing and advising element of the assessment is making sure that you are creating a script for the introduction and the conclusion part of the assessment, because these are the parts that carry the most marks. And how do I know this? It's because I talked to the teachers about it, and they told me that the introduction and the conclusion part of the assessment are the most important parts and also the longest parts of the assessment, because the way you end the assessment and also the way you introduce yourself and try to tell the client about all the things they have to know, for example, the funeral cost, solicitors fees, and so on, it shows how confident you are and how well prepared you are. And also, if you practice more and more the introduction and the conclusion, your best bet is that you will be passing the assessment, because you are showing that you are prepared enough and you know exactly what you're going to be talking about and how the structure of the interview is going to be looking like. So this is why I highly recommend for you to actually create a script for the introduction and the conclusion part of the assessment, because these carry the most marks in the assessment. Because if everything is good, if your calculation of the inheritance tax is amazing, and you even get a mark for it, but if your introduction and conclusion is poor, or you don't get to the conclusion because of your poor time management skills, then you're going to be failing the exam. So I highly recommend for you to make sure that you're creating a really good script for introduction and conclusion, as they carry the most marks in the exam. So now I'm going to be talking about the time management part of the assessment, which is probably the most hard part, because you're not going to be having a clock next to you. And even if you do, it will be very hard to concentrate if you have a clock and you're looking at all the time and also trying to the client about the problem that they might have. So it's very important that you're not rushing throughout the whole assessment, by also keeping aware of the time limit yourself. And if you're a person who's doing this assessment online, which I had to do, it's making sure that you are keeping your phone as a timer in front of your laptop, so that you can actually know how many minutes you have left in terms of how many minutes you have left in terms of the assessment. And also, if you're doing in person, I highly recommend to keep a watch on your wrist, or a wristwatch or something, so then it can also look professional as well. It gives you that professional look, but at the same time you will know exactly how many minutes you have left. Or if you're wasting too much time on the introduction, or you're not having enough time from the conclusion, you know exactly what to do and how to speed up and where to skip and where to actually talk about certain things. So it's very important that you are not rushing, but be aware of the time limit. And also, if you're doing the assessment online, then please do keep your phone as a timer. And if you're doing it as a person or in-person assessment, then please make sure that you're wearing a wristwatch, so that you can actually know exactly how many minutes you have left till the end of the assessment. The fourth best tip I can give you in terms of interviewing advising is making sure that you're engaging your client in the conversation. Do not make the client feel like they're left out, or they're no one, basically. So it's making sure that you are engaging with your client as much as you can. This means, for example, let's say when you're calculating the inheritance tax, make sure that you are telling them what you're doing. So for example, if you're adding anything, if you're subtracting anything, if you're multiplying anything, if you are talking about advising, look them in the eye and make them feel comfortable and make them feel like they are being understood about the problem and you're giving them the right advice. So make sure that you're not looking as though they're non-existent, especially when you are writing bits of the assessment. For example, when you're writing down their full name, their address, or whatever, everything that you write down, you have to say it out loud, basically, to make sure that the client is engaged about whatever you're writing. And it also in that way shows to the examiner that you are keeping them alive and keeping the whole assessment alive, because you're not making it look like as if it's like an interview per se. It's like conversation. You need to tell them what you're writing. If you're writing John Smith as the name, you need to say, so your full name is John Smith and your age is this. You need to say like this, so it looks like that the whole conversation is alive, the whole interview is alive, and they are being included in whatever you're writing and in the whole interview aspect. Because sometimes some students are very nervous, and what they do is just, they're very dry, and what they do is just whenever they ask, for example, the name, so what's your name? Okay. Your age? This is not a waitress and a consumer type of situation. This is more like you actually engaging them to tell you whatever they have to say about themselves. So I highly recommend for you to make sure that you are engaging your client when you're advising, and also when you are calculating the inheritance tax, for example. And the last step I can give you in terms of passing this assessment is making sure that you are being confident. And the only way to be confident in this assessment is making sure that you are practicing regularly, and you're practicing the interview, the whole thing, multiple times before the mock, and of course before the actual exam. And the best way to do it is, again, as I said before, is to make sure that you're treating the mock as the real thing, or the real assessment, and how would you pass it. And even if you don't pass the mock, that's absolutely fine, because I didn't pass it either. But I completely remember that whenever I failed my mock, I was very disappointed, but I took that as a challenge that I'm going to be passing the real thing, because that gives me the idea of where all the parts that I went wrong. And trust me, with the teacher or the module leader, I had to do a couple of different times interviews as well myself, to make sure that I got it really into the zone of actually passing the test, because I was there, I was practicing with her, and it was very nerve-wracking for me, but I did. I probably practiced at least 5 times before the real assessment, and that really helped me in understanding all the places that I went wrong, or all the things that I was doing wrong, basically. So I highly recommend for you to practice as much as you can, especially with a different classmate, or with someone who is a family member of yours, or even the module leader. That's even better. So yeah, that will be all my tips related to wills administration and interview and advising module part of the legal practice course. I hope all of you really enjoyed this video about how to pass the Wales Administration and Interview and Advising module in the legal practice course, because this is probably one of the hard ones and also most nerve-wracking ones, because you have to do this as a presentation style, as an interview style basically. So I highly recommend for you to practice and follow all the tips that I've shared with you all, because all of these things have really helped me in achieving a pass in the real assessment. And if you want to see more videos like this where I show you how to pass specific modules in the legal practice course, then please do like this video. Let's get it to at least, I would say, 80 likes or something, so then I can make the next video on solicitors' accounts, drafting, and also advocacy. So I'm trying to do the skills based ones, get it out of the way, and then I will be able to focus on the CPAs, also known as the core practice modules. So yeah, I hope you really enjoyed this video, and if you have any other tips in terms of how to pass a specific module, then please comment down below as well. I'll definitely check them out and add them to my list. And yeah, other than that, please do also check my vlogs related to my LPC journey, or my legal practice course journey, and how it all went and all the stress that I had to go through basically. So yeah, I hope you really enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in my next week's one.